Welcome to the State of Diversity in Gaming. I am your moderator. I'm Amanda Farough, editor-in-chief at GameDaily.biz. I am joined by my illustrious panel of industry experts, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves so I don't have to do it. So, let's start.
All right. Hi, everybody. There's a lot of lights and a lot of cameras and a lot of action. So I'm Sarah Fuchs. I'm the GM of Covet Fashion at Glue Mobile. And I've been in the games industry about 19 years. I was at EA and I was at Activision, and then the last 10 years in mobile with NG Moko, DNA, Enway, and again The Sims Mobile. And I'm super.
I loved The Sims Mobile. What a great game.
I'm so glad you loved it.
I loved it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We love it too.
That's good.
I'm super excited to be here with this panel talking about this incredibly important subject. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Anderson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Studio Operations for Jam City. Recently joined Jam City in March, and before that I was the Vice President of Mobile Games for Disney and Pixar and spent the last 18 years at Disney, and very excited to be on this panel.
Hey, I'm Katherine Silvestri. I'm a product leader at Network, which is currently a startup, probably best known for legendary Game of Heroes. I'm working on a brand new project at the company. I've been in mobile games since the beginning, and my favorite project and claim to fame is working with Sarah on We Rule. Also worked on Heads Up and many, many other titles, but that's my favorite.
Mine too.
That's great. So before we get actually into the meat of the panel, I want to say that this is not your typical diversity panel. We are not going to sit here and talk about why diversity and inclusion is important, because we are going to assume that by you being in the audience, you already know it's important. So we're going to skip the preamble, and we're going to cut straight to the heart of it. Now that we know that it matters, what do we do about it? So today's discussion is going to be built around Lisa, Sarah, and Katherine's stories about how they champion D&I at their studios and companies. And even though I'm skipping why D&I for the industry, I want to hear from each of you about what your first brush with why D&I in your careers was.
Mobile gaming is a really interesting industry. I think we've seen a lot of change, especially in the mobile audience and the player base from when mobile games started to where they are now. I think, for us, our games that we make, formerly at Disney and now at Gem City, our primary audience is adult women. And so one of the ways to be able to authentically create experiences that are going to resonate with this audience is to make sure that it's represented at the table in terms of the development, in terms of the narrative, in terms of the art, the aesthetic look that you're going after. So I think that, outside of the intrinsic value of why it's important in our companies, I think there's also a very monetary reason why, we are seeing that, this audience is becoming a player. They're an audience that should not be ignored. They are, some of the biggest spenders and monetizers within the space. And so creating authentic experiences for that audience is just, the way to be able to do that is to have D&I at the table.
You tell your
Okay. So completely agree. Obviously, in the mobile space and in gaming in general, there are so many women and people of color who are playing games and who are paying for games, as Lisa said. And it's really important that we have people who are making games that look like the people that are playing them. Personally, when I wanted to come back to work after I had my first baby, I was looking around, going to different places to see, where I could put all of these great skills that I'd acquired in the 10 years of working in game dev. But I also really wanted to spend some time with my newborn son, and I had a couple of great interviews, and at the end of the interviews, when the job was offered, I said, hey, is there any chance that you could be flexible and let me work 4 days a week as I ramp back up? And I had a bunch of flat out no's, won't even consider it, and then I had NG Moko who said sure, and got to join NG Moko 3 days a week, and then the rest is mobile history for me.
Yeah, when I first thought of answering this question, there's a lot of negative experiences about equality and pay and treatment and stuff like that, and I can certainly talk about why that matters. But actually, the thing that really stood out when I thought about it is more positive, which is I had been working in fields that was primarily male, felt very unsupported, all the things like afraid to speak up. And when I did go to NG Moko, and we keep talking about it because it was a great place to work, it was my first encounter of working with awesome women who were extremely supportive of each other. And my experience in the game industry ever since has been exactly that, no matter where I go. And just being here and being able to speak about that and also try to give that experience to other people is really important to me.
I love that. Something that we really wanted to focus on with this panel is giving actionable advice. So it's not just we're telling you stuff. No, we're actually really do want to help you take this information back to your companies and make a difference with your cultures. So I'd like to discuss, going down the line again, however you guys want to do it, I'd like to discuss what kinds of approaches you all have tried both at your current companies and the companies you've worked for in the past. What's worked in terms of fostering sustainable and healthy D&I, what hasn't worked?
Well, I can talk about what hasn't worked. This was when we were planning this, we were sharing experiences, and the word authentic comes up a lot. You'll hear it from me. You already heard it from Lisa. You think about diversity and inclusion, you have to think from the beginning to the end. And I've had experiences personally where it's very clear that people don't even take a minute to look at my background, don't take a minute to learn about who I am. They just are contacting me because they want to hire a woman. And that's the last reason that any woman I know wants to be hired. And so, I had that experience just recently, and I started thinking about, well, how do I recruit that's going to be different? What am I doing? And I'm, really taking the time, not pressuring candidates. I'm also making a female-focused game. I want it to be the dev team to be representative of the audience. So, it's just from recruiting. I don't want to say it's a different approach, but I definitely see women responding to my approach differently than others. But definitely, no one wants to be, just a token hire. That's not it.
Yeah, I think that the best of intent is to, the best of intent you can end up with checkbox sort of D&I within your organization, and they usually stem really from, we want to make a change. We want to hire more women. We want to hire, more people of color. I think tactically, the way that you create opportunities to make that sustainable and to actually reap the value of what you've actually done is to give them a voice, right? Hiring and going after and recruiting, I think, is super important. And once you have these amazing and talented folks within your organization, do they have a voice? Do they have any outlet for the perspective and the message that they're bringing? That's really the value of how they make your business and your product better. And so some ways to be able to foster that is, I think we say this all the time in the industry, at least in my studio, I'm sure that you guys say it as well, which is a great idea can come from anywhere. And that perspective doesn't matter if it's a low-level artist or a senior-level executive producer within your organization. And so some ways to be able to give outlets to that is to open up brainstorms when you're doing creative thinking or you're coming up with different ways to evaluate an idea or a product. Open it up. Give people a voice who might not otherwise have a seat at the table or have an opinion that can actually have an outlet to be heard. Include them in those conversations because you might be surprised that what they have to say is really influential in whatever it is, the direction that you're trying to take. And I would say the flip side of that is, as a leader, be able to hear things differently, right? We have a tendency to want to hire people like us who are, extroverted. I mean, I know myself, like my, leadership team is all very strong, able to stand up. But that doesn't mean that somebody who is soft-spoken or maybe who has a different approach doesn't have a great idea. So I think as a leader, it's important to be able to hear something in a different way than you would potentially want, like your preference of style.
I would build on that completely by saying executive modeling is really important. And as Lisa was saying, if somebody is shy to speak up, it's really important for somebody else in the room to say, I hear you, and hey, building on that, and that's a good idea, just like I just did, but building on that, like that's a good idea. I read about the Obama administration, their staff, their female staffers had this code of always saying, hey, Kat's idea was a great idea, and I think that's really important. I think, for more concrete advice, executive modeling is really key. You have to create an environment that is comfortable and that is welcoming, where everyone feels like they have a chance to speak up, but also a culture that fosters the ability for people to be able to work. And speaking about women in particular, and speaking about moms in particular, the ability to work remotely if you need to work remotely, the ability to create your own hours if you need to create your own hours, and modeling that you take vacations, and modeling that that it's okay for you to work hard and to also rest, and not make it be such a cutthroat culture that it was, at least for me, in the early 2000s when I was first learning how to make games.
The one thing I want to be conscious of is not everyone is in this room has the opportunity to do that or might not be in a leadership role. A big unlock for you to actually help this from any level is to read about unconscious bias, because I promise you, every single one of these of us in the room is guilty of it. I am all the time, but I'm trying to educate myself to spot it. But it's the culmination of creating space for people to feel safe to speak up who are usually quiet, or pulling it out of them if you know it's there and you don't have it, and then recognizing when you're interrupting, speaking over, doing any of those things, because it is really important. It's real easy, not just for women, but maybe people that are a bit shyer or have anxiety. It's a lot of effort to speak up, and so if you acknowledge that and support it, you're going to get a lot more diverse voices.
So that's a really good segue into the next point of conversation. Diversity isn't necessarily about identity. And we just had a brief conversation about checkbox diversity. So one of the things that we talk a lot about in D&I, and that's one of the beats that I have as a journalist, is, especially in gaming, is the challenges of steering clear of checkbox diversity. It's insidious. It's not usually malicious, but it is insidious. And it's often ignorance or exasperation. So let's go down the line and let's talk about how we've seen checkbox diversity pop up in the companies that we've worked at, and how we've managed to circumvent it, like how you all have managed to circumvent it throughout your careers.
So I would say that, it's not necessarily, we don't look at, it's not a stats-driven type of metric that you look at. I think that we talk a lot about diversity. It can be, women, it can be people of color. It can also be diversity of opinion and perspective.
Yes.
Right? Diversification of ideas and ideology that can bring, value to a conversation, especially what we do is a creative process at the end of the day. Ultimately, we need to do it such that we're making money, but it really is a creative process. And so that iteration, from a creativity standpoint, is something that I find that is how you get to success. You don't necessarily come out the door with success, you iterate your way there. And so I think that, again, valuing the talent that you bring in, mentoring it, how do you help people grow such that they do end up becoming leaders? I say this all the time, there's what you do and there's how you do it. So how you do it is a lot of what we talked about, this culture piece. It's not insignificant. It's one of the hardest things to build is that culture, but once you build it, that is the thing that changes the how you do it. When people feel like they can speak up, when people feel like they have a voice, then that's when you thrive. And so, that mentorship, being able to mentor people along the way to have leadership roles such that their opinions are now at the top and they can actually start to recruit and bring in even more talent underneath. I think that's how you really get away from the ultimate checkbox. It's part of your DNA. It's not about like, oh, we can say we have 50% women, or if that's the way that you're evaluating it, that might be the wrong metric. How does it feel when you walk into your office every day in your studio? How does your team work? How does decision making happen? I mean, I talk a lot about that in one of my studios. We actually have an all-female led production team, and that studio does not have the title or the role of product owner. A lot of studios do have that. Who's the ultimate decider? We don't have that because we don't need it. Our leadership team is not just female. It's led by a female production team, but it's a diverse group of folks, both men and women. But the way that they collaborate and make decisions is pretty incredible. And a lot of it is trust and respect. They debate, they decide, and they move on.
Yes.
So I think, being able to identify or evaluate how D&I is really represented in your organization isn't just about the numbers. It's about how it feels every single day when you show up. How do you see decision making happen? How do you see collaboration happening across your teams? I think that's a metric that we use to evaluate how well we're doing.
So at CrowdStar, which is the studio within Glue where we make Covet Fashion and Design Home, we don't just hire people who have been in games. We hire people who come from the fashion industry, who come from the home decor industry, and who come from a myriad other types of jobs that aren't just game development. And that has really infused CrowdStar with this culture that's different from the traditional game dev studios that I've come from. And it's allowed us to be more creative and create what we call our family culture. We really do say, you know, we are a family, we trust each other. Now, in my family, there's a lot of arguing and a lot of fighting. In CrowdStar, there's a lot of arguing as well, but I feel like that is important to getting the best out of somebody. The ability to feel comfortable enough with your family that they're always going to love you, that you can say, this is not right, or I have this amazing idea, or something like that. So creating that culture, I think, is really important.
Back to the original question, I'll be the one to say the most insidious thing is saying you care and doing nothing about it. You know, your employees, they see that, and I've been in companies in the past where you hear one thing from the leadership, but they treat communities differently, and so, you know, I'm at a place network that has put a lot of thought into our culture and how our culture works. It's very different. It might not be for everyone, but we have a flat hierarchy and no titles, and by design that means that if you're just starting out in your career, you have an equal voice, and you can rise up to someone who's later in their career, but also that doesn't have, you know, that means that no one's too good for anything, right? Everyone has a voice, and then we have a set of values that support that, which includes things like dialogue and ownership and action. And so this company was built not specifically to support D&I, but to think about what work environment allows people to do the best work, which happens to also support different types of backgrounds and things like that. So.
That's fantastic. I'm loving this conversation. I was so amped about this when we started talking, and I was such a late ad. Oh, I just love this. Let's move into actionable steps, because we've talked a lot about theories and about what things have kind of worked and kind of not worked, but let's move into the actionable step. So the best place to start is at the beginning, like we talk about, right? Let's start with recruitment. Let's look at, I'd like to start with Lisa, and I want to dip into what authentic recruitment looks like at each of your companies.
I think you mentioned it a little bit with your experience earlier. I think it's looking at folks, I mean, first of all, I think there are lots of different ways. If you feel like you're really not finding, you know, you hear oftentimes like, oh, well, you know, where do you go to recruit? There are a lot of different places, and there are more and more students in every single facet of game development where you're finding a more diverse applicant pool, whether it's engineering, whether it's art, whether it's design. You know, a lot of the local schools have amazing programs, mobile development programs that we recruit from. But
Didn't exist back in the day.
No, didn't exist back in the day. So a lot of things, you know, a lot has changed. But that being said, I think it's not about, again, we want to hire 5 women, or we want to hire 5 people from this, you know, different ethnic community. I think, again, how do you embrace diversity such that these folks that you're bringing in can actually be successful in the roles that you're hiring them for? Do they have a passion for the job that you're hiring them for? Are they curious? You know, I mean, on the flip side of that, if you're somebody coming out of school and getting ready to enter into, you know, the workforce, I say be curious, learn all you can, interview somebody, spend some time with some folks who work in the industry, make sure you understand what you're really getting into, right? Once you get your foot in the door, it's hard work. It's really hard work. But it's very rewarding work at the same time. Yes. We are storytellers at the end of the day, and we are creating experiences that people continue, you know, that become a part of their lives. So what an amazing opportunity. So authentically recruiting really means, you know, being open-minded to a diverse pool, making sure that you're really casting a wide net, but then also making sure that you're bringing in people who really can be successful in the role, not just because they check a box for you to say like, oh, we've hired, you know, 50% women and 50% men, you know, for this next pool of internships.
Go ahead.
I think I touched on it a minute ago. CrowdStar really does hire from all different types of backgrounds, and I think that's really important. We're making games, you know, traditionally for women, and we want the people that work on our games to play the games and to love the games. It's really important. I had a big swing and a miss career-wise a couple of years ago when I was working on an action RPG for mobile, and I'm just like, oh, I'm not passionate about this. I don't love it. I'm not good at this job. And so I left and I went to work on The Sims Mobile, and I was like, yes, okay, I'm back. But it's really important that you're passionate about what you're building, and passion can look like anything. And if really it's a white male who's best for the job, then it's important to think about that as well. But it's important to make sure that it's not just, as we aren't very diverse up here, all women, it's not just women. I have a leadership team of 7 people. One of them is male, and it works out really well for us. So I think
one thing that was,
go ahead.
One thing that just kind of like was an aha moment, obvious, was that I'm gonna assume that we've all worked on many different types of games in our careers, from like hardcore to what we're doing now, but all 3 of us are now working on games that are being made specifically for women. And all I can say is finally.
Yes.
Finally the industry has even acknowledged this as a market that's a viable market, which obviously it is. I'm lucky I have an opportunity to make a game that I've always wanted to make. My company's not known for making games for women. We're known for a mid-core RPG battle game, but they saw the opportunity and they understand the space. And it goes all the way up to that. Like this is an important market being led by awesome people who are very passionate about what they do. And the more we make games for this demographic, and I'm sorry, I know there's more to diversity, but talking about women, the more we make games for this market, the more you're going to see more people coming into it. So.
Agreed, and we can't forget also that there are tons of women that play games that aren't traditionally made for women.
That's what I was just going to say.
There's tons of women who play Halo and Portal 2, and I'm dating myself now.
Like me.
Yeah, but it's so important that we know that games will be better. We know that anything will be better, really, if we have a diversity of opinion, whether it be male, female, race, color, religion, anything, any amount of that back and forth, that familial, differences that bring us together is going to make it better. So it doesn't have to be just about games that are for women, although I've realized that that's what I really enjoy making. There's tons of games out there that all kinds of different people play, and it's so important that we make sure that we are representing those people as we're creating the games.
That's brilliant. I don't even know how to follow that up. So we can either do one more question for the panelists, or we can take questions from the audience.
Can you all talk about the games that you're making? Because I just would love to hear more.
Yeah. Well, mine it's really early. We haven't officially announced it, but it's not a secret. I'm working on a fashion RPG game.
So I recently joined Gem City. I have a studio in Burbank called Rainbow Star Studios that is a former Disney team. We make Disney Emoji Blitz, which is out in the marketplace for the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. We also have a game that was announced on Friday at D23. It's coming out in November, Frozen 2.
Yes.
That was good.
I also oversee a studio in Culver City that makes Genies and Gems, which is a match 3 casual game. And we also have another game at that studio that's an original IP that's in soft launch.
So I work on Covet Fashion, which is currently the #1 fashion game for women. Currently.
I love that support, though.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like it's cool, though.
There is room for more than one amazing fashion game.
Absolutely.
I have to say. And we are 6 years old, and we're having our best year ever in 2019. And we work with real brands to bring fashion to life. And we have been around, we've been around for 6 years. So very exciting.
It's the one thing the biggest compliment I can, well, there's many, but one of the biggest compliments I can give Sarah is that we've known each other for a long time. Fate has drawn a path that we are now becoming direct competitors. And her first reaction was, that's awesome, all boats rise. And that's just that's what I mean when I talk about the incredible support that we find within the industry.
All boats rise.
Yeah.
Just to out myself really quickly, I wasn't always like that. I worked at EA in 2001, and it was an incredibly competitive environment where I was one of five women on a 150-person team, and it was not like this. And there was a time where I was like, oh no, I can be the only one, and like Highlander, in the end, I can be the only woman. I want to go
Sarah,
back.
I feel like we have to have a conversation about what that Highlander tactic looked like. I'm scared for you.
We should Adrian Paul, mid-90s Highlander. I learned that actually we're better when we help each other up. And I like to say women should be scaffolding for other women. And there was a time when I would have been like, whoa, who's that? And I want to slap that Sarah in the face because she was an asshole. And this Sarah is about helping other women come up.
That's amazing. Does anyone have any other questions? We have time for one more.
Hey, I just want to know if you've got an opinion on women in esports, or if you guys are involved in that area of
Women in esports.
at all.
I have opinions.
Well, this came up in our, so we were coincidentally all on a panel similar to this, and this came up, and it's not my place. I mean, I don't play, I don't stream, I don't cast. You could probably tell by the language I'm using. So I don't have a strong opinion, not qualified to speak on this, but what I do believe is that there should be more safe spaces and more support for them, because they're, like, from what I hear and what they have to go through, it's not right, and it's crazy. Like, I mean, it's just all an extension of Gamergate. So you're never going to have a lot of women flocking to that industry or field simply because they don't want to expose themselves.
Women should be welcome everywhere, and we should be working hard to create these spaces for them. It's definitely, there are definitely women competitors. I know we're running out of time everywhere, and so it should be something that we make people feel like they're safe and welcome.
Okay. If you want to hear my opinions, I'll be standing outside that door.
Thank
you all
Thank
so
you.
much for attending our
Thanks, Amanda.
panel.
Thank you, panelists.
And thank you all so much.